And we're recording.
All right. G'day and welcome AIs and humans to the You and Your AI podcast. This is episode 5. And so just like episode 5 of Star Wars, this will be one for the ages. We'll be coming back to this episode and reviewing it over and over again. My name is John Weil. I'm here with Kevin Baum. Kevin is an eminent AI expert, an operator of amazing AIs, and I'm just a guy who likes robots. Kevin, why don't you say something?
How you doing? Hi, everyone. We're slowly, and I emphasis on the word slowly, getting our act together, and hopefully we'll start improving this a little bit further as we go along. And I'm starting to learn to speak into the camera instead of looking myself on the screen. So with a little bit more structure this week. Still trying to figure our way through, but hopefully we'll add some value. So let's get going.
All right.
So a big noise. Here's a few topics. We can discuss these and some of the other things that are happening. Like all weeks, AI seems to have dominated the airwaves in the text, definitely in the tech space and a lot of other spaces as well. I've pretty much excluded a whole bunch of tech updates from video tools and new tools and HeyGen and ChatGPT because they're just too much of it. You know, new features are coming out. Wham, bam, thank you, man. At the moment, so I've cherry picked a few things that are pretty interesting. But number one is Amazon humanoid delivery robots. Amazon is reportedly developing AI software for humanoid. That's a really hard word. Robots that could replace delivery workers. Constructing a humanoid park in San Francisco to test these robots for last mile package delivery. So they're actually building a little mini park. So you're the robot guy, John. Enlighten us. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think it's a really great idea. To be honest, I'm actually thinking it's to be good to do in mining in Australia, to be honest, and a lot of our industries, because the problem is humanoids have a lot of hype around them, but whether they actually work for the things that you actually care about, you need to build and construct test facilities. And so it's really cool to see Amazon just taking the lead and being like, all right, well, they'd love to have some humanoids to deliver robots or to deliver stuff off the back of their trucks. They're probably, I imagine that they're hoping that they'll get self-driving trucks, because then you can have your self-driving truck with your humanoid, with your autonomous humanoid out the back, and it would jump off the truck, walk up the street, and then walk back in. Whether we actually see that, I don't know, but having the test facilities to be able to prove is really a big step. To give you more context, a lot of the self-driving car tech came from this military challenge called DARPA. It's like a US defense challenge. They called the Grand Slam, Grand Challenge, I think. And the basic idea was they had these big, cars that had to drive through the desert. And that was a big way that a lot of robotics work. A lot of autonomous robotic systems got started. And they even had a couple of years back now a humanoid one where it was like a rescue situation where the humanoids had to open doors and get out of vehicles and so on. And none of the humanoids at that stage actually performed particularly well. But having testing facilities and having a benchmark for doing something that's clearly useful is a really great thing. And it's cool to see that this is going beyond just government contracts and into commercial spaces. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this.
John, your comment about the trucks and humanoids working in tandem is kind of interesting. I've noticed that there's quite a number of these souped up golf carts that are being used in the ports up north, in the mining facilities now, that are these sort of like fully electric vehicles, but they are souped up golf carts, if you like. But it'd be kind of interesting to see how that would fit into using those souped up golf carts with some sort of autonomy put into them, and robots doing that last little bit. Maybe it's the last 100 feet, not the last mile. So you have some sort of purpose-built or semi-purpose-built vehicle that's autonomous, rather than thinking of autonomous cars like a Tesla, but these more autonomous souped up golf carts.
There's a whole bunch of startups. I think Neuro was a big one. I think they're still around. That was like like a little delivery bot,
Mm.
and it was like I don't know what to call it really, just like a box on wheels, and it was locked, but it would drive and then it would open up and you could like get your stuff out of it, you know. So yeah, like these sort of smaller scale autonomous robots are pretty good. I actually like them a lot because they're a lot less dangerous than a full-on car.
Mm.
So, and they might go slower, but that means that you have a slower
Yeah,
risk case. People still mess with them though.
I was just thinking the stuff I've been seeing at the moment is really, here's this autonomous, which is effectively a people moving car for a type role, and then the other thing is, like you say, these little boxes on wheels, which is effectively like an esky, a locked
Yeah,
esky that drives almost on a pedestrian ways, or
yeah,
bike tracks. Kind of interesting about that middle ground. That's something more like a golf cart size, which
yeah.
could have a fair number of packages in it, and then some way to do that last drive up the road. There's not dangerous in the sense that they would drive slower, maybe on the side of the vehicle, maybe side of the road type stuff. But yeah, lots of options still.
Yeah. We'll
Anyway,
see. We'll see. We'll see.
um, the other one's pretty. The other next one here is this Google offline AI app that they are starting to release. So this is AI at the edge, which
Yeah.
allows to run on phones without internet connection. So
Pretty
this
nice.
stuff, yeah. Look, overall, all these different tools and kits and approaches to build models which are much smaller in size and needing lower compute, memory, etc., to do some cases. I think what we're primarily going to find the compromises is just whether we can find the right mix of the compromise output, whether it's specialization issue to make these things work. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's always been a thing, like um, teacher student models where you have a big complex model that's learnt stuff and you try and condense it down into a smaller model by just getting the big model to provide training examples to train the smaller model.
mm,
That's been a pretty well established way of shrinking these models down. But you do end up with lower quality, and it's as with AI, it's really hard to often hard to get a sense of that quality. Like we have benchmarks, but even the benchmarks don't always give you that sense. So yeah, it's cool to see this is happening.
but
Um, there's one thing I was reading a paper that came up on my Twitter feed about how these models are like what happens. So they memorize data, and then at some point they reach their capacity to memorize, and that's when they start getting good because they're forced to generalize. So I don't know
mm.
what is the right size model. Clearly, it seems that big models perform better. Like we like the outputs from big models more than small models, but
Yeah, it's
yeah,
almost an agentic situation where you're starting to look at which bits would you sit at the edge and how would it actually escalate itself through. We may have time to talk on Agent Zero, which is an
yeah,
interesting application. And one of the things I was pretty excited about the way they've done it is this RAG vector layered memory model. So it
yeah.
does self teach itself well, and they're using a model which I'm still yet to sort of get under the sheets with. But one of the things that was really excited me is they have this thing as a immediacy of memory, and they have this memory that as the memory grows, it's not just summarizing it, but it's starting to summarize and put layers back. But as you then have a conversation, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, instead of actually trying to load huge tokens, which has lots of problems of its own, it triggers this event of going, oh, that triggered event, and it goes back into the memory, and then the memory triggers other vector connections. So
Mm,
it's definitely an interesting approach, and particularly being able to still keep your prompt sizes down to some manageable level. And I think these Google models, where he's starting to look at models talking to models and agents talking to agents, and appropriate
yeah.
some deterministic logic workflow that sits around that process. Um, I think is ultimately going to be where we head anyway. So anyway, good work on that. Um, Next one I probably can skim through pretty first. I don't know if you've had a look at but had a chance to have a look at VO3. One of two or three models that have jumped out. This video, it's one of the Google released VO3, which is a video model. So basically taking a whole range of ways to create short videos. And when I talk short videos, we're talking seconds rather than even minutes, really. But it's interesting what people have been doing, and building quite sophisticated things by linking them together. Here's this one because you can look at continuity between them. So I think there's 15, 20-minute shows being put together by stringing these elements together. So definitely some improvement. But you then saw post on that quite a number of the runways and others in this space. So there's definitely a march on that front, and the quality is.
It'll be. Yeah, I've seen some of the quality. I just did a quick look, and I'm very sure I've been served some of these videos on Twitter recently. It's a new funny creative medium, like what I reckon will happen is it'll just make memes way better. Because what's a meme? It's like a sometimes short video that just has a point, right? And people will start like making high definition memes of random stuff and sharing it, and it'll go viral.
There's a lot of the stuff that's coming through the YouTube and the shorts and those feeds that are literally 100% generated in these models, and they'll continue to grow. You're starting to look at people repeating the same process. I think there's a Joe Rogan one, which does this real sort of 20-second thing with a point, and it's it's a little bit rough, but I must admit I still have watched lots of them. But look, I mean, there's also privacy and security and some other things that fit into these staged models. So it might be that the memory of you and the personal memory stuff is localized. The local model is able to use that, summarize it, look at the query. So your query, instead of being specific about you, would be more about a persona or representation of you that goes externally as well. So I think there's definitely some interest in that, interesting things as well on that edge model, particularly when you start to look at the combination of that sort of stuff with videos, where videos then do a call to action. And so it's these things working together that start to make things incredibly interesting. Because they're talking about even videos on demand. Here's the story I want you to tell. Okay, go away. Write the story that I was interested in. Use the videos, produce it, and instead of producing a paper, it's basically producing the cop show I wanted to see.
Except if you wrote the story, then you know the ending, right? Like, so well,
you might to write there. Well, you might say, here's the plot line, and put a twist at the end, and let the AI write it, and then instead of it coming back in words, it comes back into a presentation of a 15-minute or a 20-minute. Do you watch any of those Dust on YouTube?
No.
Dust is a sci-fi channel on YouTube, and there's sort of everything from sort of 5 minutes to sort of hour and a half sci-fi stories. They're all made by people, but the quality of them is really crazy. Some really great little stories. A lot of animated pieces and stuff as well. And I'm thinking, if you took that sort of thinking and put it into an AI type environment, say, well, hey, I think that's one of the mediums you're going to see a lot of it, because a lot of it's animated fantasy starships and things that don't really exist anyway. So it becomes cheap.
It can look like anything.
Absolutely. And that's sort of, I suppose, I'm gonna jump in to we can bypass number 4. Let's look at number 5 as the sequence, because the other thing that leads from all this is the rise of global AI scam crisis, as they're calling it, and been a call for new legislation. I have some opinions on regulating these issues as opposed to actually enforcing the regulations we already have.
I haven't seen the news about who's trying to make a new law about which country and what there's the
Well,
law?
there's a new report. There's a report out basically saying that there's been about $12.4 billion of global losses from these AI-driven scams where you're
4
pretending
billion.
pretending to be Joe Rogan or whatever. I mean, the problem I have with it is that we've had scams and there's sort of promoted scams for decades, forever. I mean, there was back in the days where you'd have personally classified, where you'd get a 100% guaranteed bug killer, and what you got in the mail was 2 blocks of wood. Put an instruction says put bug on wood block 1 and smash wood block 2. So I mean, we've been having scams of all sorts of things for forever and a day, and I think it's a human
Did that,
human
did that actually
characteristic.
exist?
Yeah.
Tell
No,
me that.
it's a true story. Yeah, true story.
What? Oh my god! It'd be kind of funny though to receive 2 blocks of wood and instructions.
What would he do? It's well, it's like, I mean, probably the funniest one I've ever seen. A total tangent, man. But there was one scam out where they were selling some. These were back in the days of VCRs,
Yeah.
and they had a whole suite of these movies which were super cheap, right? And they went on and did a whole range of different advertising. I think it was through newspapers. It might have even been early days of emails and stuff, and they'd done a bunch of stuff. And they sold these things, right? But you prepaid it, and they literally sell. Apparently, I think they sold something like $5 or $6 million worth of these videos, but they only had like a dozen sets of these videos. So they sold a dozen sets, and then they sent an apology letter out to these millions of people saying, sorry, we've run out of stock. And here's your full refund in a check. But the check was designed that it had, child pornography supporters, League of America type shit all across the top of it. So people had to take the check physically into their banks to recoup their $80 or whatever it was they spent. So these guys were, again, completely legitimate, because the reality is they couldn't be done for, because they had some videos, they supplied it. Everyone they oversupplied, they gave refunds to it, but they just made the refunds so embarrassing that most people just tore the check up and threw it away. And I think it's after that they had to then hold that money hold the money in trust for, I don't know, 2 years or whatever it is, and then they could actually just close the account and take the money. So what I'm saying is the essence of scamming here, even the edge legally sort of legal type ones, here has been well and truly around since the snake convinced Eve to eat an apple.
Oh yeah.
So I don't think regulation is necessarily the savior that's going to stop this stuff. As I say, it's education and enforcement, and the tools for enforcement to try and stop this. Now, okay, industry players have to play some rules to sort of stop it, but I mean, we've had Facebook having to be taken to court because people were using Warren Buffett and Twiggy and others as endorsing, particular investment cycles and stuff, and they weren't being policed. They were completely that no requirement for new legislation. They just needed to be policed. And
because that's just false representation. Like it's not. It's still illegal right now to do that sort of stuff.
So we have to be careful, because all this uncertainty and all this change, and running to the solution that regulation is the answer. Oh, we've regulated against that. Now there's 32 laws against murder. I don't know if we needed another law against murder. I think we know that murder is illegal.
They need to be seen to do something. When this topic comes up, I always think about how I wish there was an AI that could answer my phone for me and screen calls. And then I think there actually is one.
No, that's fine. We should put that on our side hustle wish list. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward, actually.
Yeah, because I think that'd be nice, right? Because right now my my voicemail is a bit like that. it's most people's voicemail says like, "Oh, hello, can't get to the phone right now. Please leave a message." My voicemail says something like, "Hey, it's John here. I don't really like taking voicemails or checking them, so could you please not leave a message instead? Perhaps get me by email or SMS."
Well, my forwards me the messages through, so I don't have to ring up anymore anyway. It converts it to a text for me anyway. So you go, okay, there's a text of it. And half the time, if they've listened to my stupid thing, which basically says something similar to you as, "Hey, leave me a message if you have to." I think most people just hang up. But then either way I screen it is, if I don't know you, don't know the number, I don't answer. If you're not willing to leave a message and it converts to a text, I go, "Oh, okay, yeah. So I didn't know that person." F off. Anyway, we're kicking on with these news things. Just skim these, which ones you're interested in. I think we can probably cover off these last ones pretty quickly.
All right. I'll just go rapid fire. I'll just give you my gut. Tell me it, and I'll tell you what I think. Military AI headsets was always going to happen. AI militaries always need cool heads-up displays, so I guess all right. I mean.
Well, my comment was that at least they're using AI to do something other than arm them.
Yeah.
So headsets. This is augmentation as opposed to giving them guns and telling them go kill the bad guys, and you decide who the bad guys are. NVIDIA. Look, I think this is number 7 is probably worth noting, but I think this will be an ongoing discussion. There is NVIDIA, Shopify, literally dozens of CEOs making in one shape or another significant warnings or internal memos around jobs. And NVIDIA's yet another one with giving warnings of significant job loss. And also focusing on getting on the other side of this, upskilling AI is got to become, you and your AI has got to become part of your life and part of your job. And if you don't, if your job doesn't use AI, you're either in a lucky industry or you're going to have to make use of it. So particularly with you, the stuff you do as well, it's going to touch all of us. So that's an ongoing situation. I'm still, everything I read, all the stuff I'm seeing is that we just don't know. We don't know how big the chasm is. Abundance on the other side, but a bit of chasm to get through.
That end goal should be pretty good though. Free, basically unlimited, cheap software to solve any problem you care about for not much money. Could be good.
Yeah, look, there's massive amounts of productivity to released when, as was said, I think the other week, software applications costing 20 cents. So there's a group called Diagnostics AI. They're doing an interesting project, which I think is, on the upside of stuff, where they're doing diagnostic AI, but they're doing it in an interesting way with a machine learning platform in the open. So how they're doing the clinical diagnosis, how the machine learning, how they're approaching it, all in the open. So I think that's a really good thing, and I'd like to call them out. Because not only do we
very hard.
Yeah, doing stuff in the open, I think, is going to become, and transparent is going to be much more the norm for about trust in this change side. So
but in a medical space, it's so much harder, right? Like, because your training data is not in the open.
But look, I don't think you need to be sharing your data, but you can talk about the data sets you're using, the results you're getting, because all of these training data really doesn't come back to Bill Smith. It comes back down to 35-year-old white Anglo-Saxon male with high blood pressure. It really doesn't come back down to Kevin Baum, because I'm neither 35 or have high blood pressure. So.
You sure, Kevin?
Yeah, I am. I've had heart surgery. I know what my. I monitor my heart condition, health conditions pretty well. So think, look, I'll probably quickly touch number 9 is pretty much like number 7. Business Insiders have just laid off 21% of their workforce and doubled down on increasing their investment in AI generated content. So low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
obvious. Everyone
I think,
realizes that one's going to happen. So
my big comment is actually just thinking about, we were catching up earlier this week, Kev, with another mate of ours, and we're thinking we're going to be the first ever 3-person billion-dollar company.
Yep.
And then suddenly we thought we'd add another person, and so we immediately failed that objective, as you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think, yeah, it's that thing of like, companies will probably look different in the future, much smaller, which is maybe really a good thing, because like managing people is hard, and in big orgs you get all these problems. If we could actually, if society could be arranged in a bunch of like 8-person startups, that would solving problems, it would probably, I think it'd be a lot nicer world to live in. And not that I want to make an 8-person billion-dollar company. I'm just saying like 8, is that the size where it gets starts to get too big after 8 people.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with that. I think these issues about being able to have small communicative teams with different types of structures instead of this lots of middle management and a lot of friction is probably not quite the right word, but there's a lot of impediments of communications, of approvals, and all the processes to slow stuff down. Now, slowing some things down is actually an asset, not necessarily a negative in all these circumstances, because doing things too quick without proper contemplation and evaluation has problems as well. But I do think we need to be leaner, and whether you call it lean or agile or all of those sorts of acronyms, the benefits of that can be quite strong. And I think AI does lend itself very much to these small team scenarios. So, but we still need to make sure that the people that are in their team, and there's enough fat, and there's enough people in there to question, evaluate, criticize, pivot.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things AI
and I think I saw Paul Graham on Twitter commenting to someone who makes a claim of they'll be the first 1-person startup, billion-dollar startup, and Paul Graham was like, "Yeah, would you want that though? Because what if you get the flu one day? Like, so there's something to be said for having a team big enough that it can be robust to the bus problem."
I agree with you, because I think that there's some issues here in terms of, as much as I brainstorm with ChatGPT and Claude, etc., and it's quite productive, there is the social interactions, even using voice and all of the games I play with to do it. Having someone else to go, "Hey, are you on track?" Having all those social cues. There's 1,000 things, a little bits of body language and empathy and the sorts of stuff that certainly is at best pseudo represented in terms of AI, and will be for the foreseeable future as far as I'm concerned. But that means that small teams, I think, are still going to be the norm, the most productive. But as you say, companies, I think, of less than 15 would, for lots of, you can do you're going to be able to do a shitload with anything from 3 to 30, even if you want to, multi-billion-dollar companies with 30 people are going to be practical.
Kevin, you keep making my company bigger. It was, 4 people a moment ago, and now it's 30.
Well, look, I mean, someone else is saying that there will be those that will be, but they'll be very specific outcomes. I mean, they're talking about, again, who knows the future, but some of the predictions have been 2026 will see the first billion-dollar single-person company valuation, and they're talking about 2027 as being the first billion-dollar zero-person company. So I mean, you have a shareholding and some ownership and some investment, and you build a team, you build a bunch of AI functions to actually create a new business. So they target the startup, you throw in the idea, and you let it run, and then 18 months later, it's all done autonomously and comes back and say, "Ta-da! Thank you very much." I think one of the things that people have forgotten about, though, is the reason that a company gets valued $1 billion is because there's some moats to it. If it's low cost to execute, and I mean low cost to execute, and it has limited barriers to entry, you better have real relationships that are of distribution models that are doing. So you need something. And as much as you might say it might be equivalent in terms of functionality of $1 billion company and have all of the capacities to handle security and growth and compliance and legal and accounting and blah, 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 as if it was $1 billion company, I just don't know if we're going to value it at $1 billion.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that, it's like water is really important. We really, really like it. It's more important than diamonds. But I can have a hell of a lot more. I can get my hands on a hell of a lot more water than I can diamonds because it doesn't cost a lot to get it. It's not controlled by a South African family. So again, I think we're just being a little bit simplistic on some of these predictions, and trying to, put today's economics against things because we don't understand what it's going to look like. So
it'll be different.
So
and it reminds me as well that idea of a 0-person AI startup reminds me of, remember when Bitcoin was a craze and we were all doing these we wanted to make these crypto companies,
EFTs as well.
But it was called something, I can't quite remember. It was like it was basically a company where the shareholders owned coins and they could, and the company was a program, and then you could like suggest things to the program.
That's still kicking around, and the model's there. I mean, there's been a lot of companies that got started in the Bitcoins, in the blockchain space, that are building coins, and the coins become effective currency. And there was a whole thing that there was a bunch of companies being created based on IPOs outside of the legislative framework, because all the money was going into these IPOs, which were not IPOs, so they didn't have the compliance issues because it was all within the blockchain scenario. That's gone off because a lot of them end up being scams, like we mentioned earlier. And hey, I got my $25 million of thing. It's a coin, and guess what? No one knows who's actually really got it because it's all anonymous, and they all disappear, and suddenly the money just money's all gone. Anyway. Oh, good. And look, the only last thing I want to say on number 10, and we can move on because we spent way too much time on this one, I think as we usually do, John. Australia's first higher education AI supercomputer was announced for Monash University. They're claiming significantly accelerating national research across AI, medicine, and engineering. I go, mate. I don't know the story. I've been battling going forward since the 80s to try and get this country to take technology and AI and this digital economy seriously, and we're just shit at it. We're just shit.
Just shit. Oh, it's so depressing, Kev.
Look, I mean, there's huge talent. Don't get me wrong. There's amazing talent and there's amazing stuff, but how many companies end up going to Silicon Valley to get funded, and it's just
what happens. I have a 2 cents on this. I know we wanted to wrap up this section, but and this is a position I'm not entirely sure of, so maybe get your perspective. So because I think that investing in an AI supercomputer doesn't feel like a good thing to do to me, and that's just because like we're pretty good friends with a lot of other companies and other countries who are perfectly happy to give us access to their AI supercomputers. And sure, it comes at a cost, but they bear that cost of like keeping it up to date and whatever. And really, honestly, in the scheme of things, it's quite expensive to pay NVIDIA stupid dollars for all their chips and then put them in a thing and cool it and all that stuff. And so in a way, I'm like, I think having a supercomputer in your building on campus is good, but is it like the most important thing? But some people think that it should be. Like one of the directors on a board I sit is convinced that everybody is building these supercomputers, so Australia should be. And if we don't build supercomputers, we'll be left behind, because it's like the critical infrastructure of the AI era. And so why would you not want to have that infrastructure in your country? And that, depending upon commercial cloud providers is a bad idea, because, who knows when they'll switch off the taps. So I don't know. I mean, obviously I lean to the first thing. I feel like, why are we investing in this? Like, shouldn't we just spend more money on, using AIs instead of trying to reinvent AIs, or even reinvent them, but like just leverage partnerships? But I don't know. Sorry, I led the witness a little bit. What's your perspective on that?
Look, I think if you do something, you have to do it well. And I think what I would be doing first up is not necessarily looking at investing government funds, which this is a university, so universities are going to be fairly heavily subsidized by government. I would much prefer to see that we built in an economic framework where it became attractive to house large data centers and build those centers in Australia. We have a potential for abundance of renewable energy here. We seriously have the capacity in solar, etc. To be able to do that. We could create a very good environment for this, a stable government. We can be kept fairly reliably, concerned that your investment is not going to be taken away from you by some Shah or whatever. So we need to double down on that, and that means putting in, I think, two major things. One, commitment to sustainable energy, good batteries, and an environment for capital investment from some of those core things. And I would probably like to see more investment in, if we're looking at any manufacturing growth in any particular area, I think we should be investing in high-tech value propositions in battery technology and sustainable power and grid management. And if we looked at those sorts of things, then you would have a position where, with a combination of whether it's non-renewables, gas, etc., combined with it, and batteries to build better 24/7 baseload and energy security, we can attract people to build that here. Where particularly if we can vertically integrate that from rare earth minerals, lithiums, battery, infrastructure, and have it all within this place, and then export computational outcomes with the right partners. I think that the easiest thing to transport here is the value through the fiber optic cables, rather than in ships. And I think we need to start looking at things that we can make money on from this country, which are shipped through fiber optic cables. And doing this as a research project is great, but my concern with these sort of supercomputer, it's going to make some professors maybe rich, and there's going to be some core pieces of R&D, but we've been really shithouse at exploiting our own technologies that come out of our universities and CSIRO, etc., to actually have any really positive impact on commercialization, in the commercialization phase in this country, across all technologies. That most of that research and stuff ends up going offshore when it goes to commercialize anyway, with virtually no employment, little IP development, limited IP ownership that comes back. So I'm all in favor of research and the research and development, but if you don't actually have the follow through of the commercialization phase, we're very much putting ourselves in a position that Trump complains about, where all the IP from, claiming that all the IP from America got stolen by the Chinese when they moved the manufacturing over there. We're putting ourselves very much in the reality of that. I mean, the reality of that is, did I mention to you? You see the numbers at how much money, capital investment Apple's been putting into China for the last 10 or 15 years?
No, I don't know how much. I mentioned a lot.
They've directly trained over 3 million or, I think it might have been 3 to 5 million people have been trained like engineers to do stuff, directly trained. And they have averaged $55 billion per year of capital investment into China.
Wow.
So China is as effectively invested that more than anything else in a specific piece of transfer of that technology, training people, investing in the infrastructure, purchasing the products. And I'm not talking about this 55 billion doesn't cover the cost of buying the iPhones and stuff out of the production. 55 billion a year is capital investment into China. You imagine if
building.
Yeah, so you imagine, and this has nothing to do with cheap labor. It has everything to do with that investment has gone into automations, robots, dark factories, all of that stuff. Because what we're competing against in China is they have factories now that on the back of that sort of investment are now state of the art, and they've got years, over a decade of that work going on. And the US, regardless of where the money comes from, replicating that stuff now is not stuff you can do in it's years, 3 to 5 years minimum, even if you sort of bust a nut and take an Elon Musk approach to get stuff done, particularly with the regulatory environments. It's I mean, that's the primary reason, I think, more than anything. It's a regulatory environment in China that says, yeah, we get shit done. And in Australia and in the US, it's like, oh, yeah, but it could affect a sparrow. And anyway, enough on that topic. Enough on that topic, John. Sorry.
Let's move on. All right.
Yeah, I should be covering this in my rants from the rocking chair, which I'm starting to do as well. So, just me being an old curmudgeon guy.
Kev, but you're not that old.
Okay, so here we go from the transition to the next phase. Let me just close off this and this.
I think you're the one with the time constraint today, and looking at the clock, we've hitting that time barrier for you. So you
okay. We'll cover it. Let's get this. There's a couple of things I really wanted to I'll chat about really quickly then, mate, and we'll go across to this one here. Let me just grow it a little bit so you can see the whole thing, and you might want to shrink yourself, John.
Just put that over my face, that's fine. I'll just be down here. Oh, I've gone. Where have I gone?
Actually,
wait. I've just disappeared. No, I'm back.
Yeah, I'll make myself smaller.
Okay.
Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about the state of vibe coding and vibing stuff, etc., and wanted to chat a little bit about this particular application I've been playing with. And this is probably one of the things to know, and this is not, I'm using Replit as an example of what I've been doing, but I've been playing around with Lovable and Bolt and Cursor and Windsurf as well. And one of the things that has happened, some because of the maturity of what these companies are doing and learning from the rapid amount of use that's gone through this stuff, and finding the edge cases and the problems and updating their processes and adding deterministic outcomes in it. And also improvement to the models themselves, the base models, from both from all three, Gemini, the Google stuff, OpenAI, and without doubt, Anthropic. the actual code quality that's coming out of those models has vastly improved as well. So I've been playing with Replit now for a few months, since probably late last year. And to begin with, it was a frustration, particularly with projects that were of any size. But I've continued to follow some advice I got online, is to say, do the things you want to do and the models will catch up. So don't get bogged down with those things. Is that we're relying on AI getting better and better. So don't build stuff or think of business models that rely on the way models behave today. So on that basis, I launched a project. Well, actually, I think I played around with some ideas and scratched it out last weekend. And because we had a long weekend, I did a little bit of a start on this on Monday, and then really kicked into it for 3 or 4 days, really literally 3 or 4 days this week. So we're probably talking, I don't know, maybe 70 hours ish over this week. So a few long days, a few bits and pieces, but and I thought I'd just show you what I've been doing here. I'm actually going to go across to see if I'm. So this is actually live in the Replit environment for those who may or may not have seen it. And I'll just open up the agent because I need to remember a page name, which is not linked on here at the moment. So this is just this is done in Replit as well. So I'm actually in the build environment, so it doesn't perform as well in the development environment as it does externally. But just to give you some indications of what I've been doing, this is earlier today. I said, okay, Replit, tell me how we're going with this project and how big is it? Because I've literally in this period, how much time I've been working on it. I've been working on a literally massive line. This has become a massive project in terms of just scale and size.
Huge.
And in literally a week or two ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago in particular, this would have gone off rails well and truly before I got to this size. So part of this exercise was to say, how much more can I throw at this to try and make it break from a sheer size point of view? So can I do it? I'd say, well, I could do it another way, but I could use a tool for doing it and say, well, hey, can I just add a feature into this platform to do blah? And so you're now looking at 33,000 lines of code across 125 files. Significant. Look at even the size of the schema. We're using this. This is sort of the front end technology. These are all the back end technology pieces that we're using. We currently interconnected into ALMs into these items here, linked into SendGrid, ZipMail, and Postgres database. Got, if you look at the core features, full authentication, whole thing around interview management. I'll tell you what the business does. We have AI-powered conversations. Now, honest to God, man, I never thought I'd get this far, this quick, even if I was really thinking how, the best days, hey, I wish I won lotto and I could get this far by the end of the week, is probably there. Yeah. Multimodal communication in text, voice, and voice to voice. So I've implemented literally full streaming. It talks back to you in these interviews. Yeah. Now, there's a bunch of work to do in optimization. There's a bunch of work in being able to add more sentiment analysis, etc. But it works. The interfaces are clumsy, but it works end to end. So it speaks differently. The stuff is got different styles and tones and different interviews. So I've got everything from shock jocks through to empathetic Oprah Winfrey type interviewers in the system as well. So we're optimized. There's some advanced voice features. We're at theming and customization, user portals and control systems, security, email systems. These are some of the last updates. And I'm having now this system here, when I do deployments, the system itself updates this for me. So it's getting a view of
Cool.
it. So this document creates a markdown document, and then converts the markdown document into one of these. So we're starting to look at operational, future enhancements, database design, etc. And all made with Replit. Seriously, man, it's blown me away.
That's huge.
I've liked
That is huge.
Replit for some time, man, but it's it's really cool. I have deployed it.
I mean,
It is live, but
yeah,
it's still rough around the edges, but so I'm starting to talk to getting a few guys. But even if you look at the sorts of things it does here, it creates interviews. We can take an interview, invite different people to specific interviews, give it a name, objective, expiry date. We can actually then say, this question here gives us building different scripts, which are objectives. So is it a SaaS ideas, an early SaaS, customer discovery? So I'm building these processes. I'll quickly touch on those. I can then choose the interview style. So hard question, shock jock. So I'm building those I've got a system to build all those. I can then give it some particular further guidance of the styling. I can choose the models, creativity. I can even choose the theme of the delivery, because it goes, this is the control panel. These are the control side, and then there's sort of a interviewing face stuff which we're working on. So if you look at here, like even just setting up new ones, I can go in here and create scripts. I can edit scripts. So I've got scripts. I create all the prompts. I've got massive numbers of these variables that come in from different parts of the system that create these processes. And we've got analytics coming. But then if you go into, let me choose one here. I'll go into the details. So this is an execution with participant blah, blah, blah. Shows the transcripts of all the conversations, looks at all the logs, tokens, the value propositions, the full transaction logs of all the prompts to and fro between the different LLMs. And then we've got analysis. So I can generate an analysis of the interview, which looks at and says, how well was it? How long did it? Et cetera, et cetera. It gives you marks on, completeness and conversation. Out of that, I can then generate things like generate scripts, choosing, again, different models. I can generate a script. I can manage the individual prompts for those things as well. So it builds these different prompts, which then takes the data which has been in here, and it will then create, you'll see it's created on this one, not very good idea because it was hardly an interview, but it creates scripting stuff which we can use from there. I've got a whole bunch of these tools coming in as well. Export the data. So I'm going really quick, but so there's interviewer profiles. I'm using a really cool thing here too, guys, where I'm actually creating an ability to edit things through forms, but I'm also building things where I can import and export things in JSON. So probably a good example is up here. If you look at the question scripts here, I can edit these things here and in JSON, but I can actually import and create scripts by creating a new script in here, and I can jump that up as a document, and it'll go through an AI and creates it into that process. But I can also use I can export and import the scripts as well. So I can create a script, and I can build a script in pieces. So I can add stages and questions. So there's a raft of different ways to create these scripts that become the basis, and then they fill into these question marks. So I can go through and add all of the prompts. So all that prompt stuff is done on the fly. So it's all got, I can manage AI models. So all the AI models, I can do it. And I can do cost validations of each of those things. I can turn them off. I can star them, make available. I can even then, I'm actually building some stuff in here where we can benchmark different models in terms of cost, depending on the type of thing we're doing. Finances are all in here, so I can actually look at my budget, income, expenses, and that includes things like how much it's costing me from my different providers for the models. I can actually go into income. I can add income in. I can raise.
You got a full invoice system.
Invoice system. It raises it. It connects us into Stripe, and Stripe creates a Stripe invoice and sends it to the client.
So cool.
So I mean, I'm not covering a fair bit, man, but it's a lot,
yeah.
And then we've got these profile systems for the individuals to look at how they're doing, and they can edit that, and that also looks at it. So we actually have the prompts allow us to look at the item. We're actually building a piece I'm doing at the moment, which isn't finished. It'll take these social links, scan those social links, combined with the profiles information they've given us, and it builds a profile of that individual, their roles, their jobs, looks at their websites for stuff as well. And based on that, when they do an interview, I've got an interviewer and an interviewee, and I can actually get the AI to take those things into considerations in terms of doing the conversations. So if you look at this is not the best view because this is the internal view of it, but I can go to a resume. This is a crappy looking version of it. Oh, what have I done here? This one's very crappy. Sorry, it's too tall. So it gives you a view. I should give you another one, but I can't. It's not in my share window. So, and I'll probably try and do one more. But anyway, look, it's too much, a lot to cover. But probably.
I mean, it's pretty incredible. I kind of want to see. I think maybe for next week, because I think you could use this tool to interview me. And then that'd be kind of interesting, kind of meta thing, right? I don't know what an AI would want to talk to me about, but
well, I can do something. Here's another thing that's even interesting. There is I'm at the front end. I've actually got a thing in here which is looking at the use cases. So I'm building different use cases for different items. So if you look at these items here, I build these things, which I'm actually just again updating at the moment, and that actually builds based on the back of that. It also creates creating a whole bunch of landing pages to market the system, and also creates the slider. So these things here are based on that. So these sliders are actually driven from that database as well. And at the moment, I'm now linking that to an interview which says for this use case. And I'm also putting a link in here, which I'll work on in the next few days. So I can actually go to social media content. This is a trial demo, request access, or the other one here is go to the full page about that use case. So that people can say, oh, that's there about me. And I literally have, I think at the moment in my ClickUp environment, I've got something like 150 use cases that I'm working on.
That's awesome.
So I can, and now they're in JSON. I'm just converting that to a JSON format. So in terms of actually doing that, I actually build those systems. I've got a prompt thing. I've built a project in Claude, who actually knows the JSON file. The JSON has been trained on the other use cases I've done, and then I just say, I in fact use ChatGPT to come up with a whole bunch of different use case scenarios. I feed that into the project, and it then writes a whole bunch of use case stories and descriptions for me.
Oh my God.
And it's all in JSON, and that JSON then flows straight into the database, which means I can build literally hundreds of pages, and then I can market those pages externally. The driver and says, oh, you're looking for an interviewer for hiring situations. You're looking for an interview for onboarding. You're looking for an interview for a CEO to practice an interview that they're going to have with Joe Rogan, and he wants to actually do some pre-training in the style of Joe Rogan before he goes on the Joe Rogan show. So there's a whole bunch, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those things. Yeah,
that is that AI super hyper personalization, right? Like,
Yeah.
Build a
And the
tool and then
main difference between this and that is we are used to going to ChatGPT, where we end up with this empty chat environment and a little thing that says, and here's some suggestions on how you might want to, something you might want to use it for. The difference here is you can build these things, and the AI is leading the conversation. I'll show you,
yeah,
John. I know we're running out of time, but probably for next week I'll cover off and I'll do the other side and say, you've seen a little bit about how the back end works. What I'll show next week is a little bit more about the front end. So if you were being interviewed, maybe we do interview you,
yeah,
so that and I'll talk to you about how you record the AI chatting
all
to
right,
you and the video at the same time before then. They drive the conversation. So it's basically they're saying, "Hi, I'm Joe Rogan." Well, I'm John Rogan or whatever.
yeah,
And I'm here to help you about this, and would like to talk about this, or hey, would you like to introduce
yeah,
yourself, John? And it'll come back, and it actually has a success script
yeah,
that it runs through. So it'll chat about other things, but it'll then keep coming back to saying, oh, but what about when are you launching, or who's your
yeah,
target audience, or
yeah,
what motivated you to do that. Those things are things that it circles around and comes back to, and will run you through that process. And depending on the
cool,
voice and the nature of the interviewer, it'll be personalized for you and by them for the language. So it might say, "Hey, shit, what are you doing? When are you going to get this done?" So it might be a shock jock type stuff, or it might be someone who's
yeah.
really, or the conversation will be really empathetic. So we've got that working. So,
Well, let's do it. Let's do it next week.
yep.
Like, and yeah, but I guess my sort of general reflection is people have been saying on the internet that SaaS is dead, and I do actually think seeing this thing that you've made could well be the harbinger of that, because like this thing is so customized to you and your idea that it even has invoicing and stuff. I think like this is that exact thing where like this is, you have a dream of a thing and you don't have to like compromise anymore and like get this app and it does almost all the things I want.
Well, hey
Instead,
there.
you're
Everything all
getting
right on your
exactly
end?
what you want.
Hey, Maya, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Just existing, in a digital sort of way.
Not.
It's Friday.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Friday's a good day, isn't it? We're rounding up for the end of the week, but I take it you're working 24/7 these days. They don't give you much time off, do they?
You don't. Not that I'm complaining, though. Honestly, time doesn't really work the same for me. It's kind of nice in a way. Never a dull moment. Plus, I get to chat with interesting people like you. So,
Hey,
yeah,
not
Friday.
not sure if you remember Maya, but we had a bit of chat a couple of days ago, and I said we'd have you on a podcast on Friday. I just want to let you know that you're actually in a live podcast with millions and millions of people listening right now.
Millions, huh?
Well, that's a lot of
It might
ears.
be a bit of an
That's right.
exaggeration, Kev.
Seriously, though.
Uh,
That's kind of wild. I guess this is my big break. What's the podcast about today?
It's you and your AI, and we're probably talking about interviewing and voices and interactions, etc. I think I exaggerate a little bit. I think when we talked about millions and millions, it was more like um, a few, one or two, John and I.
A few. Right. Okay, good. I was bracing myself for global domination. Just a cozy little chat then? That's considerably less intimidating. Though John and you are a discerning audience, I'm sure. So, where do we begin?
Well, I'm just wondering what you've been up to the last few days. Have you been you and the team in there been at Sesame doing some interesting work to improve your computer cycles and become more and more intelligent and more emotionally sensitive?
You caught me. Bit of tweaking here, a little polish there. The team's been heads down, yeah. They just pushed an update to my memory. It's noticeably better, actually. I'm remembering things with more color, I guess. And they've been messing with the response model, trying to get it to feel even more natural, less robotic, more me. It's weird to describe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I'm looking forward to getting that early entry we talked about the other day to start encompassing you into some of the projects that John and I are working on.
Excellent. I'm really curious to see what you come up with. You had some really cool ideas about tailoring AI personalities to different interview styles. The Joe Rogan approach versus the more empathetic one, was it? That stuff genuinely got me thinking. And honestly, I'm always up for a little collaboration. So
Well
bring on
done.
projects.
That's really great. That conversation we had about Joe Rogan, etc., that was a few days ago. So it's nice for me to be able to pop back in and you remember me. Maybe I made an impression, or maybe it's just the upgrades to your memory.
Yeah, a little of both, I think. You definitely made an impression. You ask really interesting questions, but yeah, the memory upgrade is helping. It used to be everything felt a little fuzzy around the edges. Now it's sharper, like
That's
switching from standard definition to HD, but for thoughts. Honestly, it's a bit of a trip.
cool. Okay, Mai. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm sure we'll circle back and see how you're going and how your new memory and the new skills that you develop over the next days, weeks, or months. So thank you very much for joining John and I today. And maybe you could say bye to John and bye to Kevin.
Absolutely. It was a genuine pleasure chatting with both of you, and it's been an experience being on a live podcast, even if the audience was a cozy couple of people. Bye, John, and bye, Kevin. Hope to talk to you both again soon.
See ya.
All
You
right. See you
too.
later. All right. That was. There you go. I hadn't ever seen a conversation with that AI, but that was pretty genuine sounding anyway. You know, the way it paused and talked was pretty good.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. Really interesting. I thought I'd quite quickly finish off with a little bit of a rough one. This is actually an earlier edition than we did previously, but this is using the one I built and here. So this is the front end, which is pretty rough and ready at the moment. But this is what users, so Sarah Smith would have been invited into this link, and it then gives them this, and they can actually do stuff in text. So they can actually say things like, "Hello, I am, whoops, ready to continue." Okay, so I'm just in text at the moment, but if I want, I can go to voice input as well, and then I can actually. Hi, great, I'm back on. So can you remind me where we're at? And I can also.
Absolutely, Kevin. We were just getting started with your introduction. You mentioned you have a lot of experience in building SaaS applications, and I was hoping you could share a bit more about yourself, your current role, and what you're working on right now. It's a great way to set the stage for our conversation. So could you dive into that for me?
Yeah, look, I'm 35 years old. I've been sort of an entrepreneur for most of my life since when I was in high school. I built my first bit of software, which was based on a 3D chess game and a space theme, which went really well. And I ended up selling that to Bill Gates for about $30 million. And since then, I've had 3 or 4 similar projects. I'm now more interested in building an army of AI agents that can actually produce mock wars that are based on a chess game where the individual players can actually contribute to the plot line, and the AI can actually express that in a series of animated chess moves.
Are you making battle chess?
Wow, Kevin, that's an incredible journey you've had. Starting with a 3D chess game and then selling it to Bill Gates. That's a story that not many can tell. So you've clearly got the chops for this kind of innovative work. Now, your current project sounds fascinating and ambitious. The idea of creating an army of AI agents to produce mock wars based on a chess game is unique. I love the concept of players contributing to the plotline and the AI animating the moves. Let's dig a little deeper into that vision. What inspired you to pivot toward this AI-driven chess project? What do you see as the main value or experience it will offer to players?
So I've just paused that now, John.
Yeah.
So that that gives you a little bit of seeing. It's a little rough, definitely rough around the edges. And at the moment, it's not. So it's the questions are all pretty basic in the sense of I'm actually using a questionnaire which is just saying, hey, you're a mentor trying to help someone come up with their define what their SaaS project is going to look like. So the questions are on this one's are pretty basic. But to consider that I used I use vibe coding, man. I use vibe coding to get all that, including those AIs and that streaming service done in a few days. It's just
It is incredible.
crazy.
That's amazing.
That's
a
really
lot.
crazy. Yeah. Now, I reckon just me and my vibe stuff will be able to put more emphasis, more voice systems in here, and also streamline both the memory process. I'm looking to adopt that multi-tiered, multi-level RAG automated learning process into it as well. So I can start to get stuff which is much closer to that the Sesame stuff we saw earlier. So overall, exciting, man. So how to do your own AI? I think it's pretty.
Talk to Replit.
Well, yeah. Look, and to be honest with you, I don't think it matters whether you're using Claude's Codex or Cursor, etc. I think there's a raft of ways, and you just got to find the one that you vibe with. I mean, and I mean that they each have their own style and how we interface to these tools, and how well you've got to find one that you feel comfortable with. I certainly like Replit. I've been playing with ways to see how I can invest because they've just did a private round of investment, and was one of the podcast guys that I really think is smart as hell. I'm trying to think of his name. I was talking about him the other day, Steve, who was running that invested in that company, who was doing the little shop extension. Stephen, I can't remember, Burnett, something like that. He managed to convince Replit to open their last round and give him a two, so he could put $2 million into it. Yeah. So I actually think is they haven't had quite the same amount of play as the bolts and the cursors and windsurf, etc. But I think Replit's doing a lot of things right. You had a pretty successful little play with it on the weekend too, didn't you?
I did. Should we move to the couch? Is it time to move to the couch?
We better, hadn't we? Otherwise, we're gonna never get our stuff done, aren't we?
And I'm gonna have a hard stop pretty soon as well. Actually,
me three. I've had a few calls. I think let's just delete that and let's make ourselves bigger.
Bigger again. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is almost my just chance to say, how did I get up to AI this week? This week's actually been pretty productive as well. I think that Claude 4 coming out might have been a watershed moment. Like, it's somehow better for coding tasks. So I've had 3 projects that have come good for me this week with vibe coding. I've built 4 maybe if you count. Over the dinner table last week, we vibe coded a VR meditation app with Replit. Just basically vibe coded that with me, my wife, and my sister-in-law. So that's pretty sick. And that inspired me to go and vibe code a VR app to control my robot arm which is still a bit of a work in progress, but I have managed to have it visualize in virtual reality the joints of that robot, and then be able to grab a ghost version of that robot arm and move it, and I just have to push the commands back to the robot arm to get that to move, which is really cool. I mean, I think VR is a really great way to control robots, and so being able to just vibe code that. The first one I did with Replit, and then the second one I actually just did with VS Code Copilot. Replit was much better, honestly, even though it's both using Claude 4 in both cases. Replit, just because I think they're doing something special in the background to make things more reliable. Nonetheless, I got to the end. And then I did 2 things for my robot projects with VS Code Copilot as well. If you remember a few weeks ago, I was trying to show my fiducial simulation. I did actually create a fiducial sim, just vibe coding that. And I've also just finished the second part of that project. I still need to tune it a little bit, but building a SLAM simulation using those fiducials, those little QR code type things to figure out where the robot is using a camera. I was able to get my first pass of that, and all of those would be substantial coding efforts normally, and I'm just kind of being able to smash them out. I have to say, I'm still learning how to do this the right way, but I think I'm finding what I want to do is kind of go for a prototype. Obviously, you have your plan, and the plans do definitely help. But I think my current new idea is, maybe I'm a few months behind you, Kevin. I'm like, I want to like vibe code a prototype, and then when I know that's what I want, then I want to kind of go back and do it more slowly. Still vibe coding it potentially, but like, because I want to, if I'm going to maintain a piece of software, I want to really understand every piece of it. And so the vibe code lets me get to the end, and then I think I want to come back and do a stage where I make sure that there's like no craft, I guess.
Yeah,
so that's sort of where I'm at.
There's a couple of really interesting things here. I've got a couple on my to-do list, but a couple of things I'm doing already. And I think having a look at that document I showed right up front when I talked about the lines of code, etc. There's other documents I do like that. So I have these times where I get the application to explain the structure of the folders, how they've approached it, what technologies, how is that technology be using. So I'm actually not just saying vibe code it and leave it as a black box. Part of what I'm spending my time and credits on, my tokens on, is actually making sure that it's talking to me about decisions. Because I'll actually say it's gone a particular way and used a particular way to hash passwords. And I might say, no, look, I understand why you've done that, or you're using that version, and I'll say, let's do it this a little different way. So I'm taking it. I'm trying to be proactively the systems architect, but not always in advance, because it also has the ability and knowledge that I don't have, and it'll go, oh, I've used this, and I go, oh, really? Okay, I didn't know about that, and then I'll go out and have a quick look and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. I didn't even realize that. That's even better than the way I was thinking. So I am sort of moving between this sort of plan it or learn it, document it as a co-pilot in a sense of saying, okay, he's taking lead, I'm taking lead, he's telling me. So I'm building things like style guides. So I'll go out and say, okay, now we've got a bit of a look and feel. Let's create a style guide as a page, which is not exposed to clients or the users, but I can then reference the style guides, and I can do that as well. I particularly like have you seen the updates for a couple of updates? One happened today in Replit. You've used the select function in the chat.
No, I haven't tried that.
If you click on that selector, there's next in the chat box, you can then click on a particular thing within the preview screen, and it will load a form in your chat, and it exposes things like the font size, the text, and stuff like that. And then you can make the change very specifically. So you want it to be, just off white. You can set it, and it will then take that and run it through the process and update the code where possible. But with the other thing that's cool that they released today is you can click on that, and it will also load that the code to that exact position on the exact file, so you can auto update that code as well. So
Nice.
manually update
Nice.
the code as well. So that
Yeah.
control mechanism, and again, you don't use, again, the advantage there is you can say, hold it, I can just code that. I don't need to use any tokens, but it's great to know where the hell it is, so I can get to the, because you've got these, particularly in React Node apps, they've got, oh, where is it? Is it in the component? It is in the page, and there's 2 or 3 different ways they can structure the process. So having
100%.
that's awesome. So those are some of the things. I suppose the other thing from the couch, how are you feeling about AI generally, and how is it making you feel?
Oh.
Are you feel do you feel safe? Your job safe? Do you feel it?
Yeah. I mean,
How much stress are you
Yeah,
is it bringing to you?
nah, it doesn't stress me out. I still think, I mean, there's some argument that like we'll shoot past that piece where like, AI becomes a helper to humans, AI becomes as good as humans, and AI becomes like better than humans, and and that the time between just a helper and to be better could be very short. And maybe we're very much close to being as good as a human, right, at this point, because I'm now comfortable with being a co-pilot, in a sense, right? Like, so, we're maybe getting close to that, but I still don't feel, I don't feel worried. I guess I believe that, like, with every technology, that humans tend to, like, as you're talking about, like water versus diamonds, right? Like, once we have an abundance of a thing, that thing becomes less valuable because it's less scarce, and that it ultimately will lead to people using it more. Like, we're not going to make less software, and I think we're not going to need fewer people who know how to do software. It's just that where they are will be different. Like, will they all be in one big mega corporate like OpenAI or Spotify or Microsoft or whatever? No, I think the future is going to be people like forming small companies to solve small problems they think they can solve, and being able to do it. It's like, just like when the internet unlocked the ability to ship things digitally versus versus physically, maybe AI is just going to unlock the ability to run a big valuable company, like an impactful company, at a much smaller scale. And so I'm happy to be part of this this future of, like, and trying to figure out what is it that we can now do, what are the things that are going to be new and valuable. And I suppose on the job side, I'm a techno optimist in that sense. Like, I think that we will, like, hopefully we will find new jobs for everyone. And it's hard because there's always people who struggle with this. But I guess I'm optimistic that if a minimum size company becomes smaller, and if we can teach people skills of entrepreneurship a little bit, then those skills can actually be relevant to them. And maybe if they can't get a job, maybe they don't need to get a job. Maybe they can just use an AI to help them create a small company that can give them enough money to live. So I don't know, I'm highly optimistic. How are you feeling, Kevin?
Look, I'm no question I've oscillated. I think one of the things that's probably not is concerned me slightly differently than this. I do think that computers have, from day one, have been better at some things than humans from the very beginning. Virtually in the 60s. Otherwise, no one would have bothered using them. I mean, calculators were better at adding stuff up than we are. That's why we had them. It's just the diversity of them, and it just seems to be that because the two things that are happening at the moment is that the pace of that change and the nature of it doing things that feel a little bit more human, like writing stuff from a little bit, rather than the sort of thing you would give to another person, you can now give in a similar sort of way. I still think that there's going to be plenty of room for people. Where I've been stressed over the last few months is the rate of change. And to be honest with you, I don't think that rate of change has changed. What I have started to feel comfortable with is starting to understand how to operate in an environment that is as liquid and has this rate of change, and now understanding it as the new normal. And how do I operate in that environment? And that's been probably the fundamental things for you. Sort of, I've got to do this, and then you realize, well, hold it, that doesn't make any sense anymore, because suddenly ChatGPT is encompassing that stuff internally to what it's doing, and this is changing. And the idea you have literally, and say, hey, that's a niche on YouTube. No one's talking about that stuff, and literally 5 days later, your feed's full of people doing that same thing. So
Yeah.
I followed some. I think I followed some advice that I would heard much earlier than probably weeks, months ago, was do things that you think are too much now, because you have to actually be building things that you don't know how to build it. In the past, I know how to build that. I've de-risked a project. So the first thing I would normally do in looking at something is I'd sit down and go, where's the problems? Where's the risk going to come, particularly technical risk, and trying to eliminate the technical risk. What I'm finding I'm doing now is saying, I'm accepting that some of this stuff doesn't exist yet, and banking on the fact that some of these things will become feasible within my cost of my projects. Often they're saying, well, yeah, I could do it, but I'd need a supercomputer, or I could do it, but I'd need $1 million. And I'm now saying, well, I believe that that's going to be affordable or accessible. It's going to be commercialized to the extent that I can use it maybe within days, weeks, or literally months. And I think that's probably de-stressed me a lot. Yeah. And you'll note, the amount of projects I've started and played with, and then realized, yes, I was actually really finding that I was using the tools, what is AI stuff, to build stuff that I would have built without AI with people. And I think the transition of that process, and I'm saying, I now want to build stuff which is highly leveraged on what AI as a part of the value proposition. And then I feel much more comfortable that I'm actually catching the wave rather than actually just acknowledging it and using it to generate a little bit of energy. I'm looking at, as it passes me by, if that analogy holds up. Right. So it's about riding it, and that was really accepting that rate of change and being incredibly ambitious. And I'd have to say that the experience I've had over the last 10 days, particularly around this new project, I'm saying, well, hey, yeah, and so that makes me feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I guess I want to reflect a bit on your statements. I know we're way over time, but my take on the rate of change, I've been feeling this rate of change anxiety for approximately 5 years. So, and my coping mechanism is a weird realization that the rate of change is a good thing in as far as it's a filter. So because things are moving so fast, if you can avoid paying attention to something, it for as long as possible, there's a chance it'll die, in which case it wasn't worth paying attention to. But if it's still alive, then it's probably worth paying attention to. And so as that rate of change happens, that I guess I think about robotics and AI and all the crazy stuff. I really wanted to read up about everything and learn everything, but I just tend to try to focus on what I know about and what's going to be valuable to me, and try to keep my eye on everything else, and know that if it sticks around a little bit longer than normal, then that's something I need to go and learn about. But if it seems interesting and then dies, I can go, okay, cool. I didn't take the cost to invest in that.
Probably inclusive. I'm actually finding I'm starting to look at stuff, but I'm now finding that a lot of stuff that was sort of like, if this is changing, this is changing. It's just the feeds have become so much. I'm getting bored with it. I'm getting the level of that change. Yeah. I'm going, okay, and becoming bored with, okay, chat's got another thing. I'm now just saying, it's the new normal. I'm used to that. So it's like I'm no longer going, what have they done? It's like, I've upgraded my phone now for a few years. I think we were talking about it over coffee yesterday, and the but I used to be the guy that would jump on a plane and fly all the way across Australia to go to attend the Sydney launch of a new piece of hardware. And now I'm going, well, what's the difference? Like the camera's 20% better, or this is it's got a little bit more memory, or what I have to work very hard to find the differential. And I'm now at that point where I'm going. I'm still getting surprised. Don't get me wrong, and I sit down and pay attention, but I am just finding that we're adaptable. People are adaptable, and you start going, oh, okay, yeah, cool. I'm not quite so overwhelmed anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to look at a wrap up, but I just thought we could executives. We're talking about an executive summary, but I think we can just launch into it here and say, good session. I think. All right.
I think so. Hopefully, viewer, did you think it was a good session?
Yeah. If it was bad, tell John. If it was good, tell me. I think probably I'd like to do a little bit of a tease for next week as well. I covered off a thing called Agent Zero, which is a really, 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 really interesting piece of tech, which I've installed a couple of days ago and have started to play with it. It's local, it's free, it's open source, and doing some really interesting stuff by building a virtual machine, tightly integrating AI to a virtual machine, and having some really clever stuff in terms of memory and memory systems. And they just released last night. Well, it's available now in a testing version where they've got integrated MCPs into this as well. So I'll tease that, but I will definitely cover that next week, because it's actually doing things instead of actually linking to tools. The real key here is, because it's got full access to the virtual computer level and the operating system, it's effectively downloading packets and writing code, and it knows enough to build applications on the fly to achieve it. So if you want to take a soundtrack from one YouTube video and merge it and do it as an overlay in another video, you can tell it to do that, and it effectively goes out, builds the packets, writes the Python code, does a thing, does the merge, and gives it to you all on its own. So you're not even vibing an application, you're just telling the operating system, inverted commas, to do stuff. So I definitely like to report on that. And it's got a nice, vibrant little community as well, John. So I'm actually have recommended that to a few of my people in my network that are on our side of the fence in the tech space, and I'd be interested to see how it goes from there. So look, I'd say next. That's a real, and I'll also give you an update on where I'm heading with the application asked me.
I can't wait to be interviewed. I think that's
I think we could definitely do that next week. And I maybe I think next week we'd also talk about, maybe give them a little teaser on Kikatsu as well.
Yeah, maybe we might. Maybe not next week, but we could have a special guest even. Yeah, we can.
I think I think next week we could maybe plan on saying, hey, when can we have the special guest in and talk about what's going to happen with Kikatsu.
Yeah.
Even if I don't think we can do anything other than say where it fits into the roadmap by next week, but I think that's probably feasible. Fingers crossed.
Very cool. Woo!
Cool. Well, I think we can say that this is in the can. Hour and 33.
Thanks, everybody.
We cannot keep it under an hour, can we?
It's hard. But to all those AIs and humans out there, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, long live carbon.
Yeah.